Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we are discussing Venom: The Last Dance. This movie just came out this week, and I have some thoughts. First off, I think this is an okay movie. I think a lot of people out there right now are saying it's a bad movie. I think I get why they're saying it. I do. I understand it. I think there's reasons to dislike this movie, and I think from a Marvel standpoint, it is a bad movie. You know, as a Marvel property, even a Venom movie, it's not the greatest. But as a movie unto itself, I think it's a typical popcorn movie. And you know that's okay. I think sometimes it's okay to have a mid-range movie, and Venom generally has been a mid-range franchise. None of the Venom movies have got particularly great scorings. Obviously, it's done successful in terms of the fact that it's got a third movie, but I think otherwise there's a lot to unpack with the Venom movies, and they work because they're kind of bad in a way. It's kind of Sony's ticket. If they make a bad movie, people will talk about it through that. This is not Morbius. You know, this is a movie that is halfway decent, and they kind of get the rest of the way on word of mouth, so to speak. And because it's Venom, Venom sells. Sadly, well, not sadly, but like it allows them to have shortfalls. Sadly, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so let's discuss the movie itself. I will say this is probably the weakest Venom movie from the standpoint of Eddie Brock and Venom themselves. I think that their motivation in this movie was lacking, and it felt like everything was happening to or around Eddie rather than about Eddie. He felt like he didn't really have the reporter edge that he did in the first two movies. It felt like he didn't really have anything really going for him apart from just the fact that he was sort of there throughout all of the events of the movie, so to speak. If you kind of removed Eddie from the movie, would it have gone sort of similarly? Yeah, I think it would have, and I think that's kind of the problem, right? I think if you have a main character, they should be the main character for a reason. And in this one, not so much. So in my opinion, I would have changed definitely how Eddie's motivations were for this movie. The fact that his main motivation for the entirety is to get to New York, even when there are threats from outer space around him and in regards to Venom, and they're still just trying to get to New York. It seems kind of weird. It seems like, yeah, okay, that might be a kind of cool starting motivation for the first 10-15 minutes, which is where it kind of starts off, and then I would have kind of moved away from that thereafter. It's kind of weird that they're still just trekking to New York through like half of the movie, and then there's like this whole extra storyline with obviously the bad guys, so to speak, of the movie, or well, the secondary antagonists who end up being kind of part of the protagonists by the end of the movie. I feel like as well a lot of the side characters this time around didn't really have any kind of goal or plan or plot. You got very little about Dr. Payne in the movie. Got very little about her sidekick or General Strickland as well. And those characters being the kind of three other main characters of the movie, so to speak, apart from Reese fans, Martin and his family, which arguably are the emotional core of this movie, funnily enough. It felt like it was just a bunch of side characters, one of which was Eddie. It felt like it just felt like almost like an alien invasion movie that took any kind of heart out of it. Maybe that's a bit strong, but it kind of just felt like a very standard actiony movie that you'd kind of enjoy generally otherwise, but because you know how Eddie and Venom were in the first two movies, you didn't like it in the third, so to speak. And so, yeah, don't get me wrong, there's still good parts, and I still think there's good jokes and a little bit of humor, like, goes a long way. And some of the fight scenes weren't interesting. There's a big fight scene at the end of the movie, including a number of other symbiotes, and I'll leave it there for saying much more on that. But they were fun. That was fun. I won't deny that was an enjoyable part of the movie, and seeing kind of what other symbiotes they kind of came up with and differentiating them in ways such as like one had like a snake tail, the two actually joined together into a bigger symbiote, and kind of playing with those concepts and playing with the idea that one of them had was like lightning fast, and there's there's things that they kind of played with, which was fun. But I just think that this movie felt slapdash for the first part, and then kind of thereafter kind of got its act together. And again, not in a bad way. I don't think it's bad. I think there's actually quite emotional scenes in this movie. But what I find weird about it is the movie ends in a place where you're thinking, this has got to be. This felt almost like half of a movie. It felt like half of a movie, and it feels like they were just ready to wrap up the Venom franchise for whatever reason. Maybe because they have plans otherwise with Marvel as regards going forward, especially because there is a post-credits scene. Obviously, the bad guy of this movie is Null, the primary antagonist, and we obviously get an end credits scene where he talks kind of to the audience, but kind of just in general, it seems, where he basically promises to wipe out all worlds. He's awake. The King in Black is awake. And a lot of people have been discussing prior to this movie coming out that this would have something to do with Spider-Man 4, or otherwise have something to do with a wider universe storyline, which of course is not wholly impossible. Because the beginning of this movie does reference the MCU again, with it picking up for Eddie, essentially where Eddie showed up during the Spider-Man, the third movie. It's not coming to me right now. No Way Home. Him showing up in our universe there. That was sort of kind of like reference and kind of started the movie off. And yeah, I think I don't know what the game is here. That's one thing I will say. I don't know what the idea of what's to come next. There are still symbiotes in that universe. There's all of the symbiotes weren't wiped out. Dr. Payne still has her symbiote, I'd imagine, by the end of the movie. And I'm pretty sure that the sample they collected of Venom in the initial part of the movie, where he leaves a piece of himself behind the bar, is probably going to be kind of relevant again. So I'm wondering if they're going to kind of do either whether or not it's a Marvel like MCU production or whether it's a Sony production. But I'm kind of almost thinking, are they going to do a kind of Null storyline to wrap up the Sonyverse and have Venom come back for that, and have like Kraven the Hunter and Morbius and kind of do that? Is that what they're doing? I'd be kind of dubious of having something like that, but at the same time, it's all I can really think of that they're doing in-house. Also, I just think Null is really, really poorly utilized. I don't like how do I put it? It felt like Thanos during Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, but without having a villain that kind of really steps in the place for that. So the villain of the movie is basically this non-talking, non-sentient, really, xenophage that's just going around killing everyone. And that's okay. There's movies that work with like a creature that is that is just an alien, Alien, for example, or something like Predator. Again, those movies aren't necessarily something that I'm fully familiar with, but I know the kind of concepts that are there. As opposed to this, where I feel like because you're using Null, it feels like it feels like you're adding a big bad, one of the big bads of the Marvel universe, and then not really utilizing him in any kind of real way to kind of keep the movie grounded in some way, because it still felt like a relatively grounded movie, despite the fact that you're dealing with the symbiote god, one of the creatures that, as the movie notes, existed before the universe. It felt like one of those kind of weird. It reminds me, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, of Galactus in the Rise of the Silver Surfer, the second Fantastic Four movie, where he was just a cloud because they kind of didn't really want to go the full way. And that's what this kind of felt like. Don't get me wrong, I think Andy Serkis acted quite well as Null, and seeing Null's face at the end of the movie in the post-credits scene was cool. I won't deny that, and it does look like they did really well on his design. It's just kind of like I'm just trying. I don't get why all these pieces came together for this movie. To me, it would almost feel better if you had done another symbiote, like with Detective Mulligan. Is it Detective Mulligan? And did him as kind of like the villain of this movie, and kind of had Venom. You could even go the anti-Venom route, right? Like you could still call it Venom, and you could just kind of imply that he has got a Venom suit now to some degree, or something like that. Just something different, something a little bit out there, separate to um, separate to this. I don't know. I just don't feel like this was the right utilization of an ending for Venom. I don't feel it was the right utilization of the other characters that they had surrounding them, and of course, none of them are really characters, as far as I'm aware, not characters that are really either big or existent outside of this movie. And oppositely, I think Null. I think Null's the big loss, or the big weird way to introduce him if they're going to use him down the line for something else. But yeah, I didn't, again. I'm saying all these things. I'm being hypercritical, but that's because I'm trying to dig into the movie. I don't think this is a bad movie. If you go and watch it as a surface level movie, I think you could enjoy it. I also don't think that you really need to know much about the other Venom movies to enjoy this one. I would obviously say that you should, because I think the emotional impact of the end is stronger, and I do think this movie did have emotion. I do think it did have that, especially with the family, the Campervan family with Martin, Rhys Ifans' character. Definitely had that, and then also with the ending with actually Venom, spoilers, sacrificing himself for Eddie. I think that was a very interesting end, and I think it's also very interesting that they didn't do the usual trope, and I will commend them for this in a way. The usual trope of like, oh, the main character does this sacrifice, dies, but actually there's like this other part. Like they didn't Grootify the problem, and I know that is not Groot again. That is Groot's son, so to speak, in reality. But yeah, I think there's so many times where a hero will die and then be resurrected, and I think it's nice to see that not happen this time, even though of course something will probably happen down the line to bring Venom back in some way, because Venom is too much of a money grab. No, I'm kidding. Well, sort of, a little bit. But yeah, I think they've got other plans in the works, and I think they're being coy about it right now. I don't know how that's going to look. I don't know what that's going to be, but we will see. We'll have to keep an eye out and see what that's all about. So yeah, I think this is a movie where I think this is going to be a very divisive movie. I think some people will enjoy it just for what it is and kind of say, yeah, it was, it's better than some MCU movies. Is it worse than some MCU movies? Yeah, definitely it is. Is it better than some action movies? Yeah, it is. Is it better than some sci-fi movies? Yeah, it is. Is it worse than some of those too? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just a very middle of the road movie. And I know that some people will feel that is worse than being bad in a way, and it sort of is in a way. If you've got nothing to say about a movie, it's sort of worse than it being egregiously bad, right, or fantastically good. So we will see on that one. I think it is going to be a divisive movie. I think it's going to be divisive, especially if Null continues to be a threat going forward. We will see whether that post-credit scene was anything worthwhile. I mean, if you look at something like the end of Morbius, that still hasn't paid off. I haven't even watched Morbius, and I know that hasn't paid off. If you look at the end of some Spider-Man scenes as well, even the Spider-Man movies have post-credit scenes that have kind of went nowhere at the moment. So who knows how that'll pan out. And we could be talking the 8 years down the line or something yet. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's kind of my thoughts. The movie is okay, and I think that's enough. I think that sometimes it's okay to just have an okay movie. I think I've said that a lot of times on the channel, and I'll keep saying it because that's kind of the point of what we do here. We want to talk about movies, but we want to talk about them in a kind of sensible way. A lot of people will say, "Oh, that's trash," or a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's amazing. I don't want any criticism of it." But like, that's the whole point, right? That's the whole point why we're here. So definitely think there was some good parts of the movie. Definitely think there was some bad parts. I think altogether it was a fun time, but I think they could have done a lot better for a send-off for Venom. With that said, guys, I think we'll leave it there for tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed. As always, if you have, hit that like button, subscribe if you're on YouTube, etc. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, etc. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening in too. Thank you guys as always. I'll see you later.